Well, hello, this is Billy Pate. That's my name. And I've been fishing for tarpon now for many, many years. And I've had 3 world records on the tarpon with the fly rod. The biggest one of which was 188 pounds, and that lasted as the world record with the International Game Fish Association for about 25 years. I live in Alamorada, Florida, which is just a magnificent place to live for so many reasons. The weather's wonderful, the people are nice, but what really drug me here was the tarpon that would start coming down in March, April, May, and June. There was a big group that would be headed south, and they'd come in small groups that you could throw a fly to at a number of places. We have good fishing here on the ocean side with this time of year with the fish going south. Later on, those same tarpon probably will be heading back north again. But what I really like is the fish that are coming down, and they come around Cape Sable over on the mainland, and then they come through a number of good fishing spots to get over to the ocean to continue their going to the south. And that's where a lot of us just love to fish. The water is usually pretty clean, and we're fishing places that would be like maybe 3 to 6 feet deep, not much deeper most places than that. And then another great place that I fished was a place called Homosassa, which is about 70 miles north of Tampa. And for 20 years, I would spend the whole month of May up there because it had bigger fish. The water was just gin clear, beautiful bottom, not too many other boats running around scaring the fish. And up there, I caught 3 world record tarpon on the fly rod, 2 with 16-pound tippet and 1 with 12-pound tippet. So that's kind of a start for what I love about tarpon fishing in the Florida Keys. Well, way back yonder when Homosassa was really a extremely hot place to fish, this was back in the mid-90s. I would spend the month of May at Homosassa, and I'd be tarpon fishing every day, and for each of those 20 years I would jump over 200 tarpon a year, and big fish in gorgeous country and nice people there, and so I really got to know it well. And one day my guide was coming in from another part of the United States to help me fish for about a week, and he had some kind of an airplane problem, and so he didn't show up that morning. And about 10 o'clock, I was really getting jealous of all the people that could be out there fishing for the tarpon already. I knew where they'd be because the tarpon, every day, every different bunch that came through would use the same thing. He'd show up at one place at daylight, and then he'd show up at another place at 9, and he'd be another place at 11, and you knew which way he was going and where he would be, and so then you would move on down south to be ready for him, and you'd try to travel outside the fish's path so that you wouldn't mess up the group that was coming down. But anyhow, those fish would move down, and this fellow didn't come that morning. It was supposed to help me. So I got in my boat, and this is after I'd been there 10 years or so, I guess. I knew exactly where all the crowd would be and which way the fish were going and what fly to use, and that we didn't have much wind that day, and the tides were just at a right phase to be there. Everything was right. So I ran outside of them, got down below them because I knew all of them would be coming down, following the tarpon right to where I was. And so all of a sudden, I hear about 20 fish in a school coming down, and they would do a lot of what we call daisy chaining on their trip, going round and round and round. if they're going around clockwise, you try to throw to the one on the right-hand side so you won't throw it over any other fish's back. If they're going counterclockwise, you try to throw it to the counterclockwise end so that the fish right on the corner would be the one that would eat and wouldn't disturb all the other fish. And so it just so happened that the lead fish was the head of one corner, and I threw to it and hooked it and jumped it, and it was a big fish. Usually the big fish is in the lead. And it jumped, and it hadn't been 1 minute after the fish jumped and I started fighting it, and I had some electric motors on it at that time that I could work with my feet. And then I had the rod in my hand, so I started chasing the fish, and he was going right back to up there to the old crowd. And the old crowd was coming toward me, coming after the fish. And so they didn't have anything much to do but try to get down to where I was. And so they got on the radio with me, and they said, "Billy, you've got a world record on there. We've seen that thing jump 3 times. That's a tremendous fish." And so I just couldn't quit fishing and answer them mostly, you know. I just waved and like, "Thank you," you know. Oh, gosh, what a day that was in a fish. And so the fish headed on back toward them and running through them and jumped again. They said, "Billy, let us come gaff that fish for you." He said, "You've got another world record there." And I said, "Well, I'll appreciate it. Somebody could help me when I get him close." And then he started and ran out to sea, and I followed him out there for probably 45 minutes. And because a lot of them would do that at that time of the morning, they'd go out to sea. But finally, and that was really hard to catch him like that, because he was headed straight into the wind, and I'd get my boat going straight in, but then maybe he'd pull me a little bit one way and the boat would start off, so I'd have to correct again. But finally he turned around and started back in, but kind of down south like the rest of the gang was going over there. And he gets right back into the gang, and they get on the radio again, "Billy, you've got him back. Let me come gaff him for you." So I didn't refuse him, but I just didn't answer him, you know. And so finally, all of a sudden, I get the fish up next to the boat, and he's right on the top where I can see the size. And oh my gosh, that is a big fish. So I reached around, and I had a lip gaff, one of these little gaffs that's only about 18 inches long at the most. And I had a little billy club, which is like a baseball bat, but only about less than 2 feet long. So I got those two out and finally got him right up to the top of the water. And about that time, probably the youngest, biggest guy in the group was getting really close to me with his customer who was a friend of mine, and they said, "We've come to help you, we've come to help you." And I got to thinking to myself, here I've got this fish almost here. I wonder if I could get that thing in the boat by myself. So I kept reeling, finally got him right at the boat, and he kind of rolled, not quite rolled, just got to the top right next to the boat. And I just made a lunge with a hand gaff with one hand, dropped my rod with the other hand, held on to the boat with the other hand, got it in his mouth, rammed the end of the gaff into the boat to hold him for a minute, reached down and got my little billy club and whacked him on the head twice. And the other boat now, he's getting really close to me. "Billy, I'm going to come pull him in for you." So I just said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." So I'd already dropped my rod, and I put my feet up and tried to pull, and finally, I got him in the boat just about the time the other great big guy was there. And I got my tape measure out because I knew how big the girth would have to be on that fish to beat my world record, because girth means a lot more than length, and I had learned that. I knew the formula that you got to square the girth and then later on you divide it by a certain figure, and you've got the approximate weight of the fish. And it turned out that this fish would be bigger than the fish that I had caught because he had such a big girth. But then I noticed that he was looking pretty short for that big of a girth. But I'd already pulled him into the boat, and the other guy got up beside me and said, the guide, young big guide, said, "What can I do for you, Billy?" I says, "Well, you can come read the girth for me if you will and tell me what you think about the fish." And so he jumped in the boat. He says, "Oh boy, that figure says he ought to be a world record." I said, "Now look, he's pretty short. He's not as long as my other fish." He said, "Call the dock and tell him to get the scale ready." So I did, and the guy said, "We'll have it ready for you, Billy. Run on in." I got there. There must have been 50 people on the dock. And we put it on there, and instead of beating 188, he only weighed 173 pounds. But I did catch it all by myself.